So I would say anyone buying Laundromat, anyone buying any business and this is what I'll always do moving forward, is ask the seller, what are some problems you've dealt with in the last month? Give me an example of 3 things that have come up in the last month that you've had to deal with.
Welcome to the Before You Buy or Sell a Business podcast, where we help buyers and sellers learn more about the acquisition process, discuss recent transactions, and stay up to date on the latest news in the market. Here's your host, Jared Johnson.
Hey, everybody. All right. Before we get into the next episode, I've had a lot of people reach out to me recently requesting to sponsor the show, and I've decided to go ahead and open that up. So if that's you and you're interested, please shoot me an email at Jared, which is Jared, at jaredwjohnson.com, and I'll get you some information over on how you can do that. Okay. Today we have a very special guest on the podcast. We have Keira Hamilton. I found you through your social media. You've got a great YouTube channel. I love what you're talking about, and I feel like it kind of coincides with what we're trying to do on the podcast. So I'm really excited to talk to you today and bring you on, and hopefully we can kind of dig into your background and what you're doing, and then also kind of relive some of what you're talking about on your podcast. So thanks for coming on.
Well, thanks so much for having me on, Jared. I love talking business and ETA and career changes, so I'm excited to get into it.
Perfect. Okay, so let's start with kind of your background and how you discovered ETA.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'll say I never anticipated being where I am today. This is a surprise to me, a very fun surprise, but I don't come from a traditional business background. So I actually have a master's in education. I'm a former high school English teacher. I thought I was going to do that for a lot longer. I ended up teaching for about 5 years. And around COVID time, for a number of reasons, decided that I wanted to make a change. And that's when I made my first career change. I ended up working in commercial real estate on the property management side of things for a couple years. And then I ended up getting into SBA loan brokering. And my husband and I also bought a laundromat in May of 2023. I can get into more of why of that, but I guess that's just kind of a quick overview of my background and where I am today.
Cool, perfect. So being a teacher, I think I shared with you before, but I've had some very, very successful borrowers and buyers of businesses that were working in education. My dad was a principal at a private school. My mom worked in education. So kind of grew up with that kind of group of people. It wasn't uncommon for me to spend summers the first 2 or 3, 4 hours every day having to do schoolwork, and then finally being allowed to go out and run around and play sports and do all that kind of stuff. So I have a lot of respect for educators, and I think it's a very tough job that is unfortunately not, the pay isn't where it should be. But what I've kind of noticed over the years is that people that have done well in education and then pivot to something else end up being very successful. So I don't know if you've noticed that as well, or, I think one of the things that people struggle with when they want to pivot or they want to get into ETA is not really understanding within themselves that they have the background to do it. And a lot of times when I'm sitting talking to them and going through with them what they've done and how it directly correlates to the business they're buying, they finally see this light bulb and oh my gosh, that does make sense. Like I didn't have to go to a business school to learn that. So maybe you could talk about that just a little bit, and then we could also talk about kind of pivoting into commercial real estate and property management and what you learned from that you feel kind of led you to actually going into full-blown entrepreneurship.
Yeah, definitely. So, I never thought in these terms when I was teaching. I thought of this later, but when I was teaching, something that I really loved was being an operator. Again, I didn't use that word because that's kind of a word I picked up. Like I consider myself an operator now, but when I was teaching, I loved being in charge of the classroom. I loved creating experiences. I loved running the show. I really enjoyed being in that position and supporting other people. And I think that's ultimately what you're doing when you run a business. You're the most responsible person in the situation. You have to be responsible for the success of the whole operation. You have to support so many other people. And I think teaching, I learned how to hold a lot of different things at once, have to wear a lot of different hats, have to be resourceful. People skills are really key. I mean, I was teaching 14-year-olds. So one of the more, I would say, like difficult age groups to work with. So just working with different kinds of people and having to solve problems, sometimes with not a lot of resources. I think that people in education can really relate to that. And then when I worked in property management, that was also another unexpected turn. I kind of got into it randomly just through this temp job got when I initially wanted to stay in education longer actually when I left the classroom, but it was COVID and a lot of places weren't hiring. So I wasn't able to get the job in ed tech like I had imagined, which, maybe ended up really being a good thing because it led me to where I am today. So when I got into property management, I was managing Class A office buildings in San Francisco. And when you're managing a large commercial building, it's essentially like running a business. You are budgeting, you are working with vendors, you're managing your engineering team, your janitorial team. And so that's where I really picked up a lot of, maybe you would say, the harder skills like getting good at budgeting, working in Excel, those sorts of things that I didn't necessarily have teaching, just getting more comfortable with financials. Again, I don't come from a business background. I don't have a degree in accounting or an MBA or anything like that. So I really picked up, I would say, more of those business skills there. And then when my husband and I bought a laundromat, you asked earlier how we got interested in ETA, and I didn't quite answer that. We were initially just looking to make an investment. We initially thought we were going to invest in more real estate. So we bought a multifamily property in the Bay Area at the end of 2021. And we came to this point where we had some money that we wanted to invest. We're initially thinking about real estate, but it was just hard to find anything with a good enough ROI for it to feel worth it to us. And that's when we pivoted into buying a business. And it wasn't really something we had considered very much before. And it was I would say, a challenging transition for me to make, because in my head, it was like, well, I've never owned a business. I don't have like quote unquote business skills, even though I did. I just didn't necessarily think of it in that way. So it was really interesting and unexpected transition.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much we can unpack right there. I mean, I think property management, Class A, San Francisco would be a really tough time right now, right? It's probably one of the hardest places to work right now in Class A office, just with everything going on. So you probably pivoted again at the right time. And then teaching 14-year-olds, oh my gosh, that would be very challenging. My dad would always say he liked doing elementary age kids because they're a lot easier to work with. And then he said like the middle schoolers and then, the younger high schoolers was much more challenging. So
Yes,
you
I
probably look
agree.
at it as if I can deal with a 14-year-old who's trying to be cool and, mess with their teacher or whatever, you can probably deal with somebody in business pretty easily. So that's
Yeah.
good. Awesome. So, okay, so it left you or led you to buying a laundromat. Now, I would say that is probably the most popular business that is searched online or is preached by, entrepreneurs around the world. I mean, how many books can we talk about that have, the laundromat as part of it? And so you actually ended up finding one and buying one, which is an amazing accomplishment in itself. But maybe we can go ahead and kind of talk through that, how you found it, and then really also try to draw out, any kind of piece of advice that you'd have for somebody that's looking for one.
Oh, yeah, a lot we could talk about there. So we found it on either BizQuest or BizBuySell. And honestly, we just got pretty lucky. So my husband had called the broker, happened to get him on the phone, and happened to find out the name of the laundromat, which was very fortunate because after that, the broker ghosted us. It was ridiculous. We were serious buyers. We ended up buying it, and we could not get in touch with him. But fortunately, my husband had the name of the laundromat. So we just called the laundromat directly and we're like, hey, can we speak to the owners? We know you're selling. Do you want to have a conversation with us? And so we ended up, I mean, the broker was still involved, but we worked directly with the sellers throughout the due diligence process. And I honestly think, I mean, if that broker had been more responsive, maybe someone would have outbid us. Like I heard there were more people. The seller said later there were a bunch of people interested, but the broker didn't pass along the information. Like it's so silly. So anyways, we just kind of got lucky, I think, in some ways, in that we found it online. We were able to get in touch with the sellers. We bought it for 190,000. It was at about a 4x. And then, sorry, can you remind me what the other part of your question was? Advice for people looking for
Yeah,
laundromats?
just like going through the process. So, finding it, negotiating, all of that aspect. A lot of times what we try to do is draw out, kind of what you learned along there. And then if maybe
Yeah.
the easier question would be, if you did it again, what would you change?
Something that I noticed, because I talk to a lot of people who are interested in buying laundromats, and something that I notice is that people, I think, when they're doing due diligence on laundromats, don't focus enough on the operations, which you do need to look at the financials. I mean, we went through and verified as much of the revenue as we could. So with our laundromat, about 75% of the revenue comes in some form of card payment. So
Mm.
that is a good thing about laundromats these days, is that you're more likely to run into that situation where you can verify the revenue that way. I will say the cash revenue, like I didn't go in and count any dollar bills. I didn't really verify that in a meaningful way. It ended up being fine. It was accurate with what we have. But because we were able to verify so much of the revenue through the card payments, and because it matched their P&L, I just we came to this decision of like, you know what, if they've been truthful about all these other things, then most likely they're being truthful about this. And I think that something that's also overlooked sometimes in an acquisition is the behavior of the seller and kind of the vibe you get from the seller. And I know that might sound silly to be like, why are you focusing on vibe in this very official business transaction? But like, I think it's important to have rapport. And I think I at least feel pretty confident in my ability, maybe from being a teacher, to kind of read people and get a sense of how straightforward of a person are you. And I think that's often overlooked. People are often just focusing on the business itself, but you can't do a good deal with a bad actor. I don't care how strong a business looks, like when we buy our next business, if I'm not getting a good feeling from the seller, if I feel like they're withholding information, not being straightforward, I'm probably not going to do that deal, even if the business seems really strong. Because the truth is, a seller can hide stuff during due diligence. Like, even if you do a really deep dive, there are things about the operation that they could keep from you. And that's just the fact of the matter. Or they may just misrepresent something. So I like, and two, we thought about the size of it. It was like $190,000. Not that that's an insignificant amount of money, but it's not a $2 million company, right? So if it was a larger business, I probably would have spent more time like, okay, how much cash are you really making? But really, I just verified the revenue that I could, which was a majority of it, verified the utilities expenses. And then really what we spent the most time on was understanding how their operation worked. And this is where I think a lot of people are missing a piece in their due diligence. And this brings me to one of the most important things we'll say about laundromats, which is laundromats are not passive income. They're not passive income. There is a spectrum of laundromats from completely self-serve, which means people are only going in there to do laundry themselves, to a full service, which is what we are. We outsource dry cleaning and we offer wash and fold. So there is more complexity when you get to the full service side, but even a self-serve, I wouldn't consider that passive income in the truest sense of the word. So I think advice I would give, and this is something I think we did well during due diligence, is really spending time with the sellers, being like, how does this business work? How much time are you putting into it on a daily and weekly basis? How many employees do you have? What do they do? How does your pickup and drop off system work? Who closes at night? And really figure out, how is this specific laundromat going to fit into my life? Because I can tell you, you are not just going to buy a laundromat and it's going to sit there and be nice and quiet and polite. You're going to have to do something at some point. And so I think it's important to accept that any business you buy, any business is going to have problems. That's the nature of life. That's the nature of business. It doesn't mean there's something bad about the business. Every business has problems that are unique to it. So I would say anyone buying Laundromat, anyone buying any business, and this is what I'll always do moving forward, is ask the seller, what are some problems you've dealt with in the last month? Give me an example of 3 things that have come up in the last month that you've had to deal with. And if they tell you they have not had any problems in the last month, they're lying to you. I could tell you 3 problems right now that I've had in my laundromat in the last month. And I'm very transparent about that because I don't think there's anything wrong with facing challenges. And I think if a seller is not willing to walk you through that doesn't seem very transparent to me. So I think that people really need to understand laundromats are not passive income. And once you accept that, really think like, okay, assuming I'm going to have to work on this business to some degree, how much is that going to be? And you may not get a perfect sense before you buy it, but as good a sense as you can. And what kinds of problems am I going to have to solve? And if you either can't solve those types of problems or you don't want to solve those types of problems, then it's probably not the business for you.
Yeah, exactly. Oh my gosh, that was so many things that I preached
Yes,
for
I
the
threw a lot
last
at
10
you there.
years. I really, really appreciate it. Yeah, I think the kind of some of the hot buttons that you just covered is definitely, of course, doing due diligence. Get a lot of people that are constantly foot completely on the gas. I need to close this in 30 days. How fast can we do this? And when I'm asking questions like, have you done due diligence? Have you researched it? Have you talked to the seller? All these things. And when they're constantly saying, no, we have to get this closed, like the broker's telling me someone else is going to buy it, and they're pushing and pushing and pushing, I'm trying to get them pump the brakes. Let's do some due diligence. Let's make sure that what you're buying is what you're buying. But you brought up a great point in just really feeling out the seller. And that is so perfect because so many people are highly focused on just getting the deal done or looking at it and saying, oh, well, I don't really care what they've done. I'm going to go do it this way. Well, at the end of the day, like you need to know what you're buying. And if the seller
Hmm.
seems to be off or like you mentioned, the vibe's not right, most likely it's not. And that's not something that you want to deal with. And if you're not doing the proper due diligence, you're not asking the right questions, you're not spending time with the seller and the business up front, you don't really know what you're walking into. And if you spend enough time doing the due diligence and working with that seller, you will start to see if their story's not adding up or if there's something that seems off in the business. And it's much better to say, okay, thank you, this isn't for me. Let's move on and find something else, then rush through the transaction, get it done, take over the business, and then 3 months later, you're going, oops, I can't survive. I can't turn it around. I'm uncovering all of this fraud. And yeah, that's the worst place you want to be in. So thank you for saying
Absolutely.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's great. So you obviously did due diligence like you were supposed to. Did you have any back and forth on the negotiations at all?
Honestly, no. And I guess that's something else we could have tried to negotiate. They were like, this is their price and we're firm on it. And we were like, okay, that seems good. I mean, we thought it was at a reasonable multiple. Like we did think it through, but we didn't try to negotiate. And I would guess that is maybe common for your first acquisition. And there was a little bit of that feeling of like we knew laundromats were really popular, right? And we didn't know how many other people were interested in this business, but we were like, we really want a laundromat. And there were others for sale, but this one, the thing that was really key about it was in a neighborhood that we felt comfortable with. And that is so key because there were other laundromats we looked at where I was like, if there's a problem at that laundromat at 9 p.m., I'm not going to want to go there, right? And like, that's a question you have to ask yourself. Laundromats are open a lot of hours. If you're not comfortable being there anytime the business is open for whatever reason, that's going to make your job as an owner harder. So we felt like we got really lucky, and I still do think we did, even in retrospect, in finding this. So there was a feeling of, well, we don't want someone to come in and swoop it away from us. And I also think, the value of a business is ultimately what someone is willing to pay for it. And I do think that it was fairly valued, but I also think we have gotten so much value from this business, not just in the money that we've made off of it. It is a profitable business and we have grown it. It's more profitable than it was when we bought it. But just as a learning experience, this has
Mm.
been a fantastic starter business for us. And we didn't go into this business planning to buy more businesses. But as we owned and operated this business, we were like, ETA is awesome. Like, this is cool. We want to do more of this. We want to buy bigger businesses one day. And so the value of this business isn't just monetary, it's really in the experience. Like, we joke sometimes, we're like, this was our real world MBA. Like, this is where we really got the business skills that neither of us got in school. And so, yeah, I'd say overall that's the value of it. We could have tried to negotiate more, and with our next acquisition, we probably will, but we didn't on this one.
Yeah, and as someone with an MBA, I can tell you that working in a business and owning and operating it and buying it is 10 times better than going through the
Mm,
education portion. So, but I like the way you're looking at it, and I feel like it just keeps coming back to that your original training was education, so you're always looking at it as a learning opportunity, right? So
yeah.
yeah, definitely makes sense. So, okay, so the vibe was right with the seller. You felt comfortable
Mhm.
with it. You closed on the transaction. How did it go first 30, 60, 90 days?
Well, we were there every day for 14 days straight, doing like 8 or 10 hour days because we wanted to see what the laundromat was like at all times. Like, what is it like at 7 a.m. on a Tuesday? What is it like at 8 p.m. on a Thursday? And I think that was a really important base for us to have. And I think it's really important when you own a small business, and small businesses really range. Like, mine is a pretty small business. But I think anyone who owns a small business needs to understand that you are going to have to work in it most likely at some point. I mean, people talk about how it's really important to work on your business. You don't want to get stuck working in it all the time. You need to grow it. And I do think that's true. But you have to think about how many layers are there between you as the owner and the labor force. For me, I have two employees. So there have been multiple times when someone has woken up sick, and then it was like, okay, I need to rearrange my schedule today because I'm going to go and do the wash and folds, right? And so being there in the beginning, well, the other thing that happened was 2 days after we bought it, the only employee there quit or put in her notice. So then we were
Oh
like,
no.
okay, we have to learn how to do this so that we can actually do it until we hire someone. So we felt it was really important to learn how to do the job and to not be above doing the job. I've mopped those floors, I wash people's dirty laundry, like I fold, I do everything that my employees do. I don't do it the same amount of hours in a week that they do. I'm there maybe 1 day a week. But I learned how to do everything in the beginning so that I can always rely on myself to take care of my business. If both of my employees quit tomorrow, I would keep things running. That would like change what I'm doing in my week, but I would have the skills and the willingness to go in and work and hire new people and train them and keep things going. So, yeah, we were there for 14 days and it felt overwhelming at first. And I remember being like, it's just a laundromat. Like, it's okay, calm down. But it was a lot to learn, just learning the operations of the business. The sellers did provide us some training. And it just kind of feels like a lot. And this feeling of like, oh, this is a lot of responsibility. Like, this kind of this baby that I have to take care of now, right? But it definitely did get easier over time. And now I work on it, I would say like 7 to 10 hours per week between actually going in physically and doing some of the wash and fold myself to working on it remotely. But it definitely has not, like I said, been passive income, especially in the beginning. There was a learning curve, and we really wanted to spend the time getting to know the business and being really confident operators.
Yeah, that's perfect. So, a lot of times, what we get as a lender is, "Hey, I'm looking for an absentee-run business," and
Mm.
you'll see listings all over Biz Buy Sell, absentee run or
Mhm.
semi-absentee, and I've told people forever, there is no such thing as an absentee-run business, and if there is, like, let me know, because I still have never found it. The other thing that I see a lot of times is people want to operate at absentee and completely just kind of walk away from it. And that's where it will slowly fall apart. I would assume if you didn't pay attention to the laundromat for several weeks or months on end, some pretty bad things could happen. And obviously,
Oh,
you
definitely.
understand, yeah, and you understanding the business and how to run it and everything gives you an idea of how it should be running properly. So that
Yes.
if you do take yourself out of it and you're working 10 hours a week, which is great, and I would consider that probably the closest to absentee that you can get. But
Yeah.
if you need to, you can jump in there. But if you didn't know how to run it, you wouldn't know what to look for and you wouldn't know which things are off at that time. So, yeah.
Exactly. I want to jump off a couple things you said. One about absentee ownership. Let's say there is an absentee run business, right? The owner truly lives somewhere else. That doesn't mean it's going to be an absentee run business for you when you buy it. Maybe they ran it for 20 years before they were able to do it absentee. Maybe it took them that much time to get to know the business, get a manager or something in place. That doesn't mean you're going to be able to step in and just totally be hands off. The other thing I'll say, kind of in that same vein, is I'll talk to people who want to buy laundromats who have full-time jobs, which can be done. There are people who have full-time jobs and own laundromats. But when I talk to these people, I'll ask like, okay, so what would you do if there was a problem on a Wednesday at 3 p.m. and you're at your job? How are you going to fix it? And they'll go, oh, well, I'm just going to have a manager. Like, that's the wrong answer. It's the wrong answer for a couple of reasons. One, if you're buying one laundromat, I just think it's very unlikely you're going to have the cash flow to pay someone what it would take to basically be on call. Because that's the thing about laundromats, they're open a lot of hours of the day. And as an owner, I always have my business phone on me. I'm more attentive to it when I don't have employees there, but you kind of need to be on call because you want to solve problems quickly. So you're unlikely going to be able to afford a manager with one laundromat. It'd be different with a portfolio. But the other thing is, I just don't think that's the attitude to have. If you haven't even bought this business yet and you're already saying, I'm going to have other people deal with my problems, is this really the business for you to run? Now, that's not to say you shouldn't delegate. I think as an owner, you have to delegate things. You can't be doing everything yourself, but you also have to be able and willing to solve problems if you need to. Because even if you have a manager, even if you have employees, I guarantee at some point there's going to be a problem that your employee doesn't know how to solve or doesn't have the authority to solve, or that your manager doesn't know how to solve or doesn't have the authority to solve. So if you're already thinking, I'm just going to offload all the problems to other people, I don't think that's the right mindset to have for business acquisition.
Yeah, no one's going to care about your business as much as you do, right? When you have bills to
Absolutely.
pay and that rent
Yeah.
check or rent bill's coming every month at the beginning of the month, so you better be ready for it.
Yeah.
And just because someone's a manager doesn't mean that they're going to wake up every day worried about that like you are as an owner. So,
Exactly.
yeah. Yeah, and it's like you had mentioned, if you have a portfolio of them and you have managers in place, and like you said, it's great to delegate. But I think the most important thing that you covered was most people that say, "Hey, it's an absentee business," if you really peel back the onion, you'll see that they spent 20 years learning how to operate the business, that they can look at it in 4 seconds and tell you what's wrong and how to fix it
Yep.
because they have all this experience. You can't expect yourself as a buyer to be in the same position as that person because you didn't develop all of the knowledge and experience that they did over 20 years. And so it will take you a significantly more amount of time to be able to discover what the problem is and fix it. And I think that's kind of the importance of what you said there, is that people think that it's, oh, well, they're running it that way, I'm going to run it that way. Well, no, they spent all this time learning it, and that's why they're able to do that. And then and then they've probably got the right people in place that they have trained themselves, that they trust and that they can rely on. But at the end of the day, if it really comes down to it, they can get in their car, drive down there, and take over the laundromat in 2 seconds, and they know how to run it. That's the importance of it.
And that team they've built, that team is not necessarily going to be there when you take over. Like in my case, seller's employee quit 2 days in. And I think that's fairly common, especially if they have a relationship with the seller. They've known them for a long time. They may not be comfortable with a new owner coming in. And I think that's something you kind of just have to expect. And if it doesn't happen, great, nice surprise. But like you should go in expecting to see some turnover and have there be some extra upfront work to take care of that in the beginning.
Yeah, and sometimes it may be something that's necessary as a buyer. You may go in and say, okay, this isn't the right manager or the right employee
Yeah,
for this job, and I need to be able to move on from them and have somebody else come in. But you better know how to run the business if you're going to do that. So it makes
exactly.
sense. I want to go back to something that we kind of started talking about a little bit. You were looking for more real estate investment and then
Yeah.
turned to business. Now, a lot of people are kind of in this boat, and I would say from middle of 2020 until now, I've seen a rapid increase in people that are in that same situation. So maybe you could talk a little bit about, I guess the mindset that you kind of went through of looking for more real estate, and then how you got to business, and then considering that you now do both, what are the major differences?
Oh, great question, Jared. I'll tell you up front, we're not buying any more real estate anytime soon. I'm getting out of that game, trying to get out of that game. So, yeah, I mentioned we bought a 4-unit building in December of 2021. We live in one of the units and rent out the others. It's in the Bay Area. And, it was going well for a time, to the point where when we were ready to invest, we were thinking about buying more real estate. And my husband was really leading the charge on that one. We were looking at some out-of-state properties, probably like Ohio at the time. And there were houses that you could buy for $80,000, but it was like, but we'll make a couple $100 a month. Is that really worth it? There is still risk involved. I I don't I really believe that real estate isn't totally passive income either. I mean, I think it can be more passive than business acquisition. In my experience, though, I wouldn't call it passive. You do still need to put effort into it. So the idea of being far away from an investment made me uneasy, especially as someone who worked as a property manager. I was like, I want to be able to manage it. I want to be a little more hands-on. So putting our trust in a property management company that we don't know really felt risky. So there just wasn't quite enough cash flow there for the money that we were going to put in. And I'll say I'm glad that we didn't do that, because we've ended up having quite a bit of challenge with our real estate investment since then. So I'm glad we didn't get into any more. And just to kind of give you a brief overview, in December of last year, we had a tenant stop paying rent, and it ended up being a very messy situation. We actually just yesterday got a new tenant in that unit. So
Oh my God.
months later, it was finally
Yeah, 6 to
finally
7 months, that's
resolved.
crazy, yeah.
Long time. Yeah. And so the actual eviction process itself was about 4 or 5 months. And, there were points in there when there was just truly nothing we could do. We had an attorney, it was going through the courts, and our attorney was like, we just have to wait for the courts to take a look at this. And things were so backed up in the Bay Area. That's not even the worst eviction case in the Bay Area by any means, but it took a while. And then when the guy moved out, it just ended up being a really nasty situation inside. I mean, the whole situation, including like the rent that we lost and the money we had to spend getting the unit back in good shape, was over $25,000. That is just money that we're not going to get back. And I do want to say, like, I definitely think there should be protections for tenants in place. I'm absolutely like pro tenants' rights. I've been a tenant in the Bay Area before with a slumlord landlord. But it is particularly challenging in the Bay Area when you have a tenant who you are evicting for just cause. They're not paying you rent or they're violating your lease. It can take a while. And there was really just this feeling that we didn't have control over it. There was nothing
Mm,
more that we could do. And I have found so much more control in operating a business. I mean, there are still laws in place, obviously, as there should be, but like if my utility bills go up, I can raise my prices the very next day, right? I can respond to situations and not a lot more nimbly, and I have more control over the value of it. So the value of our business has gone up pretty significantly since we bought it just a year ago. Our real estate has gone down, and that just has to do with the conditions of the Bay Area market. And it doesn't really matter too much what we do to the building, it's not going to really raise the value. Rents have gone down, you know. I've also seen how with business acquisition, generally speaking, you need less cash up front. I mean, we bought our whole business for 190,000. I don't think I mentioned this, but we got a loan from a family member in order to do it. So we did make a cash offer, and then we have a loan payment to our family member. So that was 190,000 to get in. Our fourplex, we needed $400,000 cash to close, right? So obviously it was larger investment. We bought it for 1.45, but still, when I think of the headache from this investment and just the overall money we've made, it hasn't been a super strong cash flow. Like, I definitely will put future capital, at least for the time being, until something significantly changes, into business acquisition.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And I think in kind of a reference point is if you put 400,000 into a fourplex, your return and what you're going to get at the end of the year, um, compared to if you put 10% down or 15% down even on a business, the return you're going to get after paying the debt service is significantly higher. And I think that's what a lot of people are noticing. Everything you mentioned is absolutely accurate in what a lot of people are noticing. But I think the other side of it that a lot of people are learning is they just can't get that return anymore on their money in real estate. They're sitting there crossing their fingers and hoping that the property appreciates. Now, of course, you get depreciation and all the other, the things you can save on taxes. But at the end of the day, the challenge that people are having is if they say, I have worked my butt off to save $400,000 and I want to put it into real estate and I'm going to only make, 50, 70, $100,000 a year after paying my debt service and then having to deal with evictions and all of that kind of stuff. Um,
Mhm.
and then they look at it the other side and go, I can buy a business and I can put in 400,000 and I'm going to have several $100,000 every year after paying the debt
Yeah.
service. So we're seeing a lot of that. Now, of course, they all have risks. They all have, challenges and things that can be, can kind of sway your opinion on the risk versus reward of it. But I think you hit some great points and really kind of summed up why a lot of people are now looking to get out of real estate investing and moving into business. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I will say it depends on what your goals are. If you really want to keep your W-2, I do think it's hard to buy a business unless maybe your spouse is going to be running it, right? Like I said, I don't believe in passive business ownership, at least at the size that we're talking about at the small, medium business level. I do think it's more possible. Definitely, you could have like multiple real estate investments and have a W-2. Not to say they're not going to beat work, but yeah, just to point out, I do think it depends on your goals. Business acquisition is more work, but that's what I like about it. I can work on it and my work makes a difference. With my real estate, there's been so much effort I put into it and it didn't make any difference because there are factors outside of my control.
Yeah, that's a great point as well. You can instantly see what, when you're investing in the business, whether it's your time, your money, your training, energy, all of that stuff, you'll instantly see some return on it compared to with real estate. You're again just hoping that rents go up and appreciation goes up and your debt comes down and you're eventually at a point where you can make more money. But as you brought up, it's not passive. There, you spend 6 or 7 months trying to get somebody to leave, and then after they do, then you have to spend more money and time cleaning it up and starting over. And then
Yeah.
you're scared from that point on to which tenant can you put in there, and so you have to be careful when it comes to that. And yeah, it's a whole nother thing. But people could
Yeah,
probably say the
absolutely.
same thing with employees in business sometimes as well.
Mhm.
But it's a lot easier to say, hey, thanks, this isn't working out, and move on and find someone to replace them than it is to replace a tenant. So um, it definitely has its pros and cons. So that's
Yeah.
great. So, all right. So you also mentioned that you do SBA loan brokering. So maybe we could talk a little bit about that. What do you focus on a certain type of, SBA product, um, different types of loans, any of that? Maybe give us a little background on that as well.
Yeah, so I focus mostly on 7A and with a lot of first time business buyers. So SBA, just for listeners, can do a number of things. You obviously know you're an SBA lender, but I focus mostly on the business acquisition side. And I love working with people who are making a career change or who are getting into business for the first time. I think there is so much valuable experience, like I mentioned, to be had in business acquisition. I do see a challenge that people run into in that position is, I think, not really understanding sometimes or not appreciating totally the responsibility that comes with business acquisition and maybe having some unrealistic expectations about the size of the business that they're going after. But yeah, that's just kind of a brief overview.
Yeah, I think you and I talked about that a little bit before, and I
Yeah.
see it as well. People that are kind of shooting a little bit too high. And then I also have had plenty of people that it's the other way around. They're saying,
Oh,
"Hey,
yeah.
I just want to buy something for 400,000," and I'm going, you have the capital and you have the experience to go much larger. I kind of talk me through that. And a lot of times they will kind of say, "Well, I was just scared and I didn't know if I could." And sometimes we can kind of meet in the middle and say, "Let's have you search for something a little bit larger." But yeah, there's a lot of times people will reach out and say, "I want to buy this business," and I'm kind of looking at their situation, saying, "Oh, okay, we need to have a conversation here," and that's okay. Like you were talking about earlier with your laundromat, you feel like it's your MBA, you're learning. Now, when you go and look for the next opportunity, you feel a lot more confident and a lot more comfortable in buying that business because you're able to kind of rely on your experience that you've had over the years of running the laundromat. And sometimes people just need to understand that. And I'm sure you also
Absolutely.
find that buying a business yourself gives you great insight when you're talking to your clients. So that's something that I've learned myself that really helps me is I can sit there and break it down for them and say, this is what you're going to encounter in the first 30 days. This is why you need working capital. These are the things that you need to look out for. And you get a better perspective than just shuffling paper across your desk to try to get the loan approved. So
I think you brought up a great point. There, I think, are people on both ends of the spectrum. And I think I was definitely closer to the like, can I do this? Is this right for me side? And that was partly why we started with such a small business, is we didn't have experience in the space and we wanted to get that experience. And it was a good fit for the amount of capital that we had available to us. So I do think there are some situations where, yeah, people just feel intimidated by the idea of business ownership, and that's why they're not going for it, even if they have the skills and the money to do it. And something that I'll say is that, at every big step I've made, whether it was buying our first home, selling our first home, buying a fourplex, buying a business, I have always felt uncertain. Like every time we go to sign the paperwork, I'm like, I hope this is a good decision. And that's not to say we haven't thought through it carefully. We've thought through it so well. I just don't think you may ever get to a point where you feel 100% certain about something until you do it. And I think some people are maybe waiting for a feeling of like, okay, once I feel totally confident about this, then I'll go and do it. Once I don't feel nervous anymore, I'll go and do it. But I think nerves and uncertainty are just part of it. And I've learned that more over time. Like, I can't just wait until I feel totally confident to do something, especially if I haven't done it before. I mean, before I bought a business, I didn't feel like 100% confident I could run one. I'd never done it before, right? So it makes sense. So I do think there's some people who kind of need that push and need to understand you may never arrive to a place where you just like feel in your heart totally good about it. But if you've thought it through carefully and you've thought like, okay, I have the necessary capital, I have the necessary experience, then it could be a great decision. On the other hand, I think you have people who, I think that some people look at business mostly as numbers, and business is a lot about numbers. You should definitely assess the financial health of a business. But I think ultimately business is about people. It's because of people that your business is running, the people who are your labor force, your customers. And I think if you take too much of just a numbers or financial approach, you can forget how much of a responsibility it is to run a business. And if you're buying a bigger business, and I'm talking in SBA terms, so like let's say you need 3 to 5 million in debt. I would say that's like a larger size SBA loan. That's a lot of responsibility to take on. And some people say, well, a bigger business is going to be easier to run because you're going to have better employees, higher quality talent, managers in place. And like, yes, I do think that is true to a degree. Like, it's less likely that you as an owner will have to step in and perform the labor, a lot less likely than it is for me with my business, right? You're still responsible for those people, right? You're responsible for making sure they get paid. You're responsible for the revenue. If you have a manager, a top manager that quits a month after you buy it, do you have the skills to step in for them? And do you have the skills to hire a replacement? Could you write a job description for that position, right? Do you want the responsibility of a $4 million company when you don't have experience running a business, you don't have experience managing a team, you've never had employees? That to me seems a lot to take on. Now, if you've been in a management role, maybe you've been a C-level executive, that's a different story. But I see people who don't have a lot of work experience to begin with and don't have a lot of cash relative to the acquisition. Like, they've got $100,000 and they're trying to buy a $4 million company. Not to say $100,000 is an insignificant amount of money, but it's a little out of touch when you don't have the experience to make up for it.
Yeah, there's a couple things there that I would definitely like to hit on. One of the big things that I think people forget about when they are buying a business, and where I feel like private equity really gets it wrong, is when you're buying that business, they are looking at it from a numbers point. They're saying, this is what the SDE is, or adjusted EBITDA. This is where I can eliminate expenses, right? And increase those numbers. And what they're not thinking about is those are people, those are employees, those are people that have spent sometimes second, third generations working in that business, and they are really the business and what makes the business successful. And when you walk in there, they're relying on you to feed their family. And if you think you're just going to look at it as numbers and wipe those people out and then expect the business to just still operate perfectly, like, you are so wrong. And that's where I feel like a lot of people do get it wrong.
Oh, yeah, I just kind of want to add on this thing I just thought of. I was at a real estate meetup before we closed on our laundromat. We were talking to this guy and we were talking about how we were planning to buy a laundromat, and he was like, "So what are you going to do to improve things when you get in? Are you just going to fire the attendant?" And I was like, "No, we're not going to fire the attendant. One, we need an employee to run the business. But two, I just didn't like how he said that. Like, oh, you're just going to go in and fire someone." Not even to use the word art. Like, it would be different to say, okay, are you going to go in and evaluate labor costs and see if you need to keep all your employees? That would be a little bit different. But just to be like, oh, are you going to go in and fire someone as your first move? Like, that doesn't feel good to me. That's not how I want to operate. And I don't think that's even the best way to do business. Like, one, that doesn't feel good as a person. Just be like, I'm going to take over this business and then get rid of someone who's been doing a great job there so I can make more money at it. That doesn't feel good. But two, I just think if you have a mentality like that, how well are you going to treat your employees? How well are you going to treat your team? And I think, one, people deserve to be treated well just because they do. But two, I think that people do a better job when they see you as reasonable, when they like you, when they can get behind the mission of you as an owner. And I think that ultimately improves your bottom line, right? Like, I think your business will run better when people feel good about working there, when they trust you, when they see that you care about them. And so I think there is a huge detriment to people who are coming in, like, to your point, private equity, just looking at the numbers, just looking at the bottom line. Like, sure, maybe you could make more money, but I think that your customers are going to suffer. I think you'll have probably a lower quality product or service because how happy is your team? And so it's both an ethical issue for me, a moral issue, but I also just think it's a better way to do business to treat people well.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, most businesses, their biggest asset is actually the employees. And if you don't
Yep.
understand that and you don't work on improving your asset like you would in real estate, you're not going to get very far. So yeah, one thing I really focus on with buyers is asking them, when you're doing your due diligence, find out what's the most important thing to the seller. And I would say
Mm.
80% of the time, the reason they're scared to sell or they're reluctant to sell and why they've held out for so long in selling is they don't want to walk away from that employee base. They've spent so much time and energy with those people, they become like family, and they're scared that someone's going to walk in day one and get rid of everybody. So make sure that you're paying attention to who the employees are, who's important, what's important to the seller, which is likely having the employees remain in place, and then find a way to ensure that they will stay there and make sure that the seller is comfortable with your plan moving forward and keeping them there. And you'll have a much easier transaction moving all the way through. And then, of course, the business will continue to do well once you take over because you're keeping that staff around. So, yeah,
Totally agree. It makes your transition easier if everyone leaves. Like, again, that could happen, but that's a lot of historical knowledge that you
yeah.
would be losing. People are your most valuable asset, as you said.
Exactly. Well, I think we probably need to do like 7 more episodes and cover different topics on each one. But it's
Yeah.
been great having you on, and I'm sure we'll do that. So at the end, I always ask 2 questions. So the first question is, do you have a mentor or have you ever had a mentor?
Oh, that's a great question. When it comes to business, not really like I don't know if you would consider this a mentor because not an in-person mentor, but I follow a lot of Layla Hermosi's
Mm.
content. Are you familiar with her?
Yes, my wife loves them. Yeah, she's always like sending
Yeah.
me the podcast. Hey, you need to listen to Alex. Hey, do this. Hey, listen to her. And then, yeah, so.
Yeah, my husband listens a lot to Alex's content, and I listen a lot to Layla's content. So I really love all the content that they're putting out, and she just gives great advice, and she's always like, look at the people who are ahead of you, see what they're doing, and do that. So I'm like, okay, you're way ahead of me, so I'm gonna look at everything that you're doing. So she's been a really valuable resource to me.
Yeah, I also love how they talk about like treating people well and treating people with
Yeah.
respect. And at the end of the day, I like how I feel like I kind of connected to Alex just the way he is, and how he's just like shut up and get to work. Like it's basically the way he
Yeah.
is, and that's how I've always been. And sometimes it's difficult, and people are like, "Whoa, calm down," but then seeing someone else do it, but he still does it in a way where they're not being a jerk. They really are passionate about the business and success, and they want people around them to be successful. They're trying to consistently bring them up a notch and pull out the success from them. So, yeah, it's great. He's
Yeah.
someone definitely to listen to, pay attention to.
I've really come to believe that business can be a way to do good, to have a positive impact on the world. And not, I mean, I went into teaching because I wanted to make a positive impact. And I'm not saying like business is charity or business is altruism. Obviously, I bought a business to make money. I do make money at it. I just think it's possible to make good money and be a good person and have a positive impact on the people around you. And I think when you own a business, you become like you have a position of power and you can use that power for good if you choose. And I think a lot of small business owners do take that approach, and I'd love to see more people in business take that perspective.
Yeah, I completely agree. And you may have just answered my next question, but what motivates you and what drives you to continue to be successful?
Oh, that's a great question. So I've really loved seeing how the work that I do in business has an effect. And I felt like a lot in teaching, I would work really hard and I wouldn't always see the impact for one reason or another of what I was doing, whether it was that impact is just really delayed or the system of education that I was in. And I've seen a lot more direct impact from my work in business. I do enjoy making more money than I did as a teacher, and I enjoy having more control over my income in business through the decisions that I make. And I've come to see too, I didn't always see making a lot of money as a positive thing. Like teachers, don't make a lot of money. And I used to think like, oh, if you want to make a lot of money, that's not a good mindset to have. But I have seen how, when you make more money, you have more of an opportunity to make positive change. You can help people around you, and just being in a position of power, like I said, within a business, you can decide how people are treated. You can decide how much people are paid. You can decide the working conditions that people have. And people spend so many hours of their life working. Like having a positive work environment can be life changing for people, right? So I actually really love having responsibility. Like I love being like, okay, I am responsible to these people and this business, and I want to do a good job, and I want to make money, and I want other people to make money and have opportunities too. And I think that with the right mindset as an owner, like we can all win in business.
Yes, that was an excellent answer as usual. Oh man, so this has been great. I really appreciate you coming on. Where can people find you?
Yes, you can find me on LinkedIn, Keira Hamilton, Keira spelled Keira, or on YouTube, Keira_Hamilton. I just put out a 3-part series on business buying basics. I really believe that business is something a lot of people could enjoy and be successful in. But I think, speaking from personal experience, it can be intimidating. Like if you don't have experience budgeting, like I talk to people who want to buy a business and they don't know how to read a P&L or they don't know what a P&L is. That doesn't mean you can't do it. It just means you have to spend time learning. And I think that's where the teacher in me comes out. I really want to demystify the business buying process and break things down in simple ways. So I've got a couple videos on there about how to buy a business that really breaks things down pretty simply. And then also some content about how to buy laundromats that you should definitely go and check out if you're interested in either of those things.
Awesome, cool. Well, yeah, everybody go find her YouTube channel. And don't forget, you can always find ours at Before You Buy or Sell a Business on YouTube as well. It's been great having you on. I'm sure we'll have you on again, and I look forward to hearing from you again soon.
Yeah, Jared, thank you so much for having me on. This is a really fun conversation. I love talking business, so I really enjoyed it. Thanks for the time.
Of course. Thank you.
Thank you for listening. We hope you found this podcast informative and helpful. Please don't forget to subscribe on your favorite podcast player. For more information, or if you'd like to discuss a transaction, please go to www.jaredwjohnson.com.